Welcome back to the Exempt List. Today, we're talking about quarterbacks, one topic that nobody ever likes to talk about or delve into or spend years of their lives arguing about. But we are joined by Derrik Klassen of Bleacher Report to go over all things quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, old quarterbacks. We're just going to get right into it. Week 2, Exempt List coming to you now. Derrik, my friend, how goes it today?
Not so bad. I gotta say, I'm not a fan of the doubleheader action. It's a little exhausting after a full Sunday of football, and those games were they didn't really get you excited to end the week of football on. But other than that, we're cooking. We're doing good.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Derrik does quarterback centric work for various outlets. Right now, the biggest one he's doing work with is Bleacher Report. So the Monday night doubleheader. 4 quarterbacks playing like poo, all at the same time. That was not a fun experience for me, and I'm sure for someone like you who cares more about quarterback play than I do. I think they are scourges upon society, and defensive players are a persecuted class of people. But I'm sure for you, that was a not great night of football, outside of maybe Cleveland's quarterback having a dud moment.
That was probably at least the most fun part of it, is seeing him lose the game on multiple defensive touchdowns, given up. Not gonna complain about that. I will say I don't remember if we got a Bryce Young interception, which is sad because I really wanted them to hit the cycle on the doubleheader for all quarterbacks to throw an interception, because I know for a fact the other 3 did. A little sad.
Bryce did not throw an interception last night.
I know he gave up the strip sack, but that's not the same, because even then we would have needed all the quarterbacks to give up a strip sack, and I think only a couple of them did. We needed them all to throw the interception, and Bryce kind of failed us there.
Bryce had 2 strip sacks. One of them got called back for a penalty. So, it wasn't
maybe that's enough to
him.
Get him there. If he's got 2, maybe that's enough to get him there.
Yeah, but you know how bad the Monday night games have to be for you to watch that Bryce Young performance and to have a reasonable thought that Derek Carr might have been worse than him yesterday.
Dude, Derek Carr for 2 weeks in a row now has been so just complete wet blanket nothing. And then the fourth quarter, he's like, I'm going to throw a touchdown to Rashid Shaheed. And it's like, okay, yeah. All right. I guess I don't know if that's a formula that's going to actually win them the division, but it's a good start for now.
They're just getting I feel like yesterday was just a microcosm of the Derek Carr experience, right? Where on paper, they should be pretty good. We've got some arm talent here. We've got some athleticism here. We've got, good size for quarterback. You got experience. And then it never comes together in the way that you hope it would. But against a team like the Panthers, who maybe sending a top 4, top 5 pick to Chicago after the Bryce Young trade, I guess that's enough to get you across the finish line. So rough game. And it's one of those games where I think every team comes out feeling a little bit worse about themselves. And I'm talking about like all 4, the Panthers, 100%. Saints, Browns, Steelers, because even the Steelers fans that Kenny Pickett, I like to scroll through and see what terrible things fan bases are feeling and saying about their teams after a game like that. And even Steelers fans like, does Kenny Pickett think? I don't know, which is a pretty amazing thing for Steelers fans to say, because that thing is like a borderline cult. But we'll get into some of the younger quarterbacks a little bit later. First, we got to get into some funny, goofy stuff from the weekend. So last week we had Justin Mosqueda's on from SB Nation, big time Packers fan, covers the Packers, does a great job doing that over there. He has basically, behind the scenes in our little group chat to pull the curtain back, has made us violently aware that David Bakhtiari is not playing in these football games in a manner that he probably should, since he tore his ACL in 2020. I think coming up on 3 years is when he tore his ACL, because that was late 2020, if I can recall correctly. So basically, since then, David has had some conniptions about playing on turf, which was only exacerbated by his best friend, Aaron Rodgers, tearing his Achilles on turf on Monday Night Football for the world to see, which first sent David into a tizzy where he was tweeting about, grass versus turf and the injuries. And, look, I do think he has some points. I don't know if the Aaron Rodgers play was the right one to show that with, because that one was just kind of on Aaron not throwing the ball and then getting tackled, and he's almost 40 years old. So, those things tend to happen when you're at the later stages of your career. But Bakhtiari took it a step further by just popping up on the injury report on Friday as questionable. There wasn't really any injury situation going on during the week, but I guess as the fallout from the Aaron Rodgers injury, and this is all speculation, I'm guessing that caused him to rethink some things. He was thinking about playing on turf, and all of a sudden he's just out for the game on Sunday, which led to his brother, Derrik Bakhtiari, who's on Twitter at ebach92. If you've seen the TikTok video of the guy doing the graph of the around and find out the graph where it's just going upright, he posted that over an Ian Rappaport tweet where Ian Rappaport said that Bakhtiari would be inactive. So now we have questions. Eric, what does this mean? Who is around and finding out about what? Because if this is about your unwillingness to play on turf, you're only hurting the Packers. You think Roger Goodell is going to get up there and say, well, maybe actually turn around and tell my 32 billionaire bosses that they need uniform grass that needs to be kept up with like the highest paid groundskeepers in the world every single week because David Bakhtiari doesn't want to play on turf? What kind of delusion is that? What is that?
I mean, first of all, congratulations to anybody who had David Bakhtiari's brother being the one who would go at the NFL this year. I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card. I don't think anybody had any bets for that one. Second of all, as a non-Packers fan, you already kind of said this. I've heard and thought about this way too much because of justice. Like, there's no world where I should be thinking about, I mean, David Bakhtiari is good, but I shouldn't be thinking every week about whether he's going to play just because he's on turf or not. I don't know. I think it's kind of ridiculous. Like, you got to play the games, man. They paid you a lot of money to go play the games. And like you said, like, Goodell's not going to... There aren't many players, period, in the league that Roger Goodell is going to be like, all right, we got to reshape how we're doing everything on grass. We got to remake all the stadiums, blah, blah, blah. Let alone an offensive lineman who hasn't played in like 2 years really anyway. Like, what does Eric think he's instigating here?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And the only people that are getting hurt by this are the Packers, because you think the Falcons care if David Bakhtiari doesn't suit up? Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you. Please put Rasheed Walker out there. And like one of the first places of the game, they were running some slide protection and Rasheed Walker read it wrong and just let a sack run right by him for, let a pass rusher run right on his inside for a sack. And it's like little things like that where, can you survive a game without David Bakhtiari? Sure. But the things that he's good at, the other players might not be good at, tend to add up over a game. And I really think that they need to figure this thing out because you can't have your star left tackle just sitting out. Like, dude, Matt LaFleur after the game, he was asked about it after the game and basically just gave an exasperated, like, hey, this is what we've been doing for 2 years now. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to say. We're going to keep this in-house. But the more and more this becomes a story and the more that people like us who are not Packers fans kind of realize what's going on, Matt, you're only going to get to ask more questions. So you kind of got to figure this out and just get to the next step with this David Bakhtiari thing. So now that brings us to the question. Is there any, and I mean in like the history of the game, is there any offensive lineman that would have the sway to get the turf changed to grass? No.
No.
No. Okay.
You can pull up like Orlando Pace, like, and none of that matters. I'm sorry. They're going to look at you and be like, buddy, you're not scoring the touchdowns. What are we doing?
And not even just like one. Okay, let's take all of like the future Hall of Fame caliber offensive linemen that are playing right now. Even though, I think maybe the past 3 years have made it a little shaky in terms of just talent, I would say Bakhtiari is like a Hall of Fame guy in terms of talent, the consistency. It really is a special thing he's been able to put together throughout his career. Bakhtiari, Trent Williams, Zach Martin, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, all those guys said, No, I'm done. Okay, put the next guy out there then.
Yeah, they'll be like, okay.
Right. I don't understand what he thinks he's stopping except like the success of his own team. And truthfully, like if this is such a big mental hurdle that you can't play, which I kind of do understand to a degree, why don't you just retire then?
Right. I mean, like that's the thing. Like they play in the NFC North. These turf games are going to happen just based on who you play in your division, let alone whatever else you end up playing for the other 10 or 11 games. I mean, like last week they played the Falcons. That's not in the division, but you still end up with these games. Like these games are going to happen. They're going to be half your schedule probably on any given year. This
Right.
isn't a problem that's going to go away.
Yeah, I saw some people saying trade him to MetLife, but or trade him to the Jets, but the MetLife turf, they've been one of the biggest villains of the NFL over the past few years. So I don't really see how that's gonna help him and move this thing in the right direction. But it's just funny that they think they're sticking it to the NFL like this when one of the first rules I think of becoming an adult and how you deal with things is learning that like if you don't care about something that someone else really cares about, you have the upper hand over them. NFL, they don't care about this turf versus grass thing. Like that's going to have to be a collectively bargained issue in 2030. And by then, I'm assuming David Bakhtiari will be well on to doing, the next phase of his life. I mean, that's 7 years from now. So I guess he's just not going to play, which in its way is an amazing power pull, to say, I'm not going to show up for this game. And you're still going to put me back out there at the starting left tackle when we get back on grass next week. That's kind of powerful.
I guess that's actually the better question is like, how many offensive linemen can get away with that?
Oh, okay.
It's probably right. Like a dozen, maybe. Like it's not group. All that many.
It's the same group,
Yeah,
like
it's Jason Kelce. It's all those guys.
The future Hall of Fame guys, the current All Pro guys. Yeah, that's an interesting situation that got there in Green Bay. But let's move on to some actual football. Week 2 just happened. We are now what? Okay, so 2 games through the NFL season. A lot of teams have had their playoff hopes kind of dashed. Let's start off with the NFC North with that. The Green Bay Packers just lost to the Atlanta Falcons, as he covered. The Minnesota Vikings are 0-2. The Bears are 0-2. The Lions are 1-1 coming off of their loss against the Seahawks. I feel like this division is kind of turning out to be what people thought the NFC South might turn out to be. With our 3 2-0 teams, ignore that, the Panthers have started both their games against divisional opponents. We'll sweep that under the rug for now. The NFC North, not looking great. And I think especially with Chicago, doesn't really look like much help is coming for the rest of the way.
I don't know why like everyone was kind of in on this division being like one of the powerhouses in the NFC. Obviously, like the NFC in general was up for grabs, so I guess you got to have a take somewhere. Yeah, you got to have a take somewhere and guess that some division is going to be some sort of a powerhouse. But like the Lions are cool, but like you look at them defensively and like in the back 7, they still just don't have many guys. Like their front has come together really, really nicely between Aiden Hutchinson, James Houston's a nice player. Josh Pascal looked great in the first game. Like they got dudes up front, but in the back end, it just doesn't feel like a contending caliber team. And then you look at the offense, like they've got some nice players. Jameer Gibbs looks explosive already, but like they just don't feel like an offense with real firepower. Like you can always get into the, run the ball, play action over the middle. Jared Goff throws a 16-yard dig route. You can get like top 10 offense out of that. But that just doesn't feel like an actual contending formula without like a true superstar receiver or somebody that's going to just make explosive plays all the time. So the Lions feel like a 9-10 win team who's going to be fine, but not really get to the end of the road. And then you look at the Vikings, we all knew they were going to regress. Like they don't have anybody on defense and they won a record amount of close games last year. Like there was no way they were going to be that good. And then you look at the Packers, I think they've been good. But again, they're almost like the Lions in the sense of like you look at them and it's like, where's the secondary and where's the offensive firepower? Like it's all put together really nice, but it just doesn't have the punch to be like a contending team. And then the Bears, we just don't even need to do that.
Yeah. Okay, with the Packers, at least if you're a Packers fan, you can say, hey, we are like babies on offense,
right?
Pretty much. Outside of, offensive line and running back, we are like literal children. Jordan Love, We know his story. He's getting the first chance to be a real starting quarterback in the NFL in his career. Like Luke Musgrave, you're starting tight end, rookie tight end starting like that doesn't doesn't usually go all that well. Although he's got off to a good start. What Jalen Reed, Christian Watson, like this is your skill player core. These are guys who are Jordan Love's probably the oldest one at like 24. So at least you can kind of buffer your feelings with that. But the Vikings, like you said, I don't really think anyone should be surprised that this is happening. It's just the opposite of what happened to them last year. You're playing in these close games to get down to the wire. You won an inordinate amount of them last year. This year, maybe so far, it looks like the regression luck is not in your favor. So look, it's a pretty crappy division. But if you're a Bears fan, after watching that Panthers game last night, you can say, hey, maybe we'll have both the top picks in the NFL draft next year. It's like there's a real scenario where this thing starts off the 2024 NFL draft in some way, shape, or form starts off Bears, Cardinals, Cardinals, because the Cardinals have the Texans' first round pick after the CJ Stroud trade or Will Anderson trade, however you want to warp your mind into looking at that. And then, the Panthers gave up all their picks to Chicago for the Bryce Young selection. So, hey, everything's terrible right now. You failed another rebuild. Your team's no good after spending a ton of money in free agency. But Caleb Williams or Drake May might be coming. That's all you got if you're a Bears fan. Because this thing, it sucks because, we were big fans of Justin Fields coming to the NFL. And I still, like, you watch some of those throws that he had against the Bucs on Sunday. It's like, man, like, there's still so much talent here.
There's still something there, man. Like, I watch, and it's only for like 2 or 3 drives a game. You only see it in these little spurts. I can't understand like how a guy that talented who played the way that he did in college with some of the accuracy he showed in college, and then to me, like that Clemson game where just the toughness to like battle through a rib injury, I was like, man, that's a guy. How does he forget how to play football? Like, it just doesn't. Everything about it feels so much like a Bears issue rather than a Justin Fields issue. And I'm not saying like the Bears need to give him another shot. Like at the end of the year, we're probably going to be at a point where they need to move on. But somebody else should try to see what's going on here, because like he's just too talented and has too many bright moments in a team on a roster that is still so bad. Like, I think people saw them getting DJ Moore and they were like, oh, this is going to be fixed a little bit. And then you watch them, they can't protect anything. Their interior is all over the place. Like, nobody is picking up anything. Darnell Wright, I think, was a good pick, but like he's struggling early as a tackle. And then like none of their receivers outside of DJ Moore are very good. Like Darnell Mooney is at best like a speedster who should be a number 3. Chase Claypool is like not actively playing football.
Yeah,
and then everybody else they have behind him is like not very good. Like Velus Jones, they only use on jet sweeps, which is an insane pick for a guy you spend a top 100 pick on who's like 27 years old. But
I mean, dude, he was healthy and active. I mean,
yes. Like, it's just the whole, you look at the whole operation, and I think because Fields has been there for so long, it's so easy to default into like, this is his fault, he's got to show it. And I do think that's true to a degree. Like, the great ones truly do show some amount of consistency by now. But like, man, this situation is still so bad. And I think just because he's been there for long enough, we assume that it's gotten better. It's not. Like, they still suck. They're horrible around him. The entire operation is bad.
Yeah, and even the way they spent their free agency money this year. Yeah, you go big on TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. You do, right. Like, Bills fans were not.
Go pay another receiver.
Yeah, it's not like Bills fans usually when you see a young, because I mean, Tremaine Edmonds, he came into the league so young. I think he's only 24 or 25 right now. A young linebacker like that, all the athleticism in the world, and Bills fans are like, yeah, okay, that doesn't really matter, like us losing him. And it didn't, because he's not that good. It's just it's weird. Like the evaluation process that they had in terms of putting together the 2023 roster, I think they really mis-evaled on like the pro scouting side of what was actually happening with these guys last year on their previous teams.
Even on their own roster, they paid Cole Kmet $1 trillion to be like the 20th best tight end in the league. Like it's just none of what they're doing makes sense. And that's another thing where I think like the optics of it kind of trick you. You're like, oh, they have this expensive tight end. He must be good in helping Justin Fields. And it's like, Dalton Schultz is probably better. And he's on like a 1-year deal with the Texans. Like the whole operation just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. All right. That's enough talk about the Bears. They suck. And they probably always will suck because that's what they've been since I was in middle school. I'm almost 30, bro. Since I was in middle school, that was the last time the Bears were like cool to watch, when they had Urlacher and Lance Briggs and all those boys. I'm almost 30. Something's got to change. And we'll change the topic to another bad team. The New York Giants. That game was insane. Like I kind of had it on because, dude, I don't know. Ever since I started, working for the Daily News like 4 years ago, I just can't unplug from these New York football teams. It's like my tick. I don't know. The Giants were down 28-7, 20-0 at one point, and the Cardinals, in just a last gasp of incompetence, let them come back in third and fourth quarter, and they lose 31-28. I'm a Falcons fan. I've seen some that was up there, man. That was up there. You got the game of a lifetime from Josh Dobbs. Literally the best.
He was gaming a little bit.
He was gaming, like he was actually playing well. The big scramble where he bulldozed a guy over into the end zone. Come on, like he was out here. And how do you lose that game? Because if you're a Cardinals fan, you know that game's not coming for you a whole lot this year. There's not going to be a whole lot of times when you can say it's late the third quarter and we're up 28-7 for the 2023 Arizona Cardinals, and you blew it. That's tough.
Against the playoff team from last year.
Right. Yeah. The Vikings.
I mean, they made it. Whether all the qualifiers need to be applied is
right. Cool, because the Giants last year, they were like the Vikings. You win not as many close games as the Vikings do, but when you run into the real teams like Dallas and Philadelphia, you get absolutely dismantled, which is what happened to them last year, and it happened in the playoffs. Doesn't really look like this year's team is that much different. So how do we feel about this Giants squad after they had to rally? I know how I feel about the Cardinals. They're bad.
Right.
They're really bad. And I think a loss like that hurts because you probably won't have too many chances to like legit win a game moving on this year. But does this change how we feel about the Giants at all?
A little bit. I mean, the offense really turned it on in the second half, but even that is like, it's the Cardinals defense, man. Like, you probably should have been doing that for 4 quarters. Where I'm stuck with the Giants is it seems like it's been really hard for them to land on an identity on both sides of the ball. Like, defensively, they have Wink Martindale, who we know what he wants to do. He wants to blitz. He wants to be crazy. He wants to play man coverage. He wants to get in your face. They just don't really have the personnel for that. Like, their pass rush group is okay on the outside, but like I think Kayvon Thibodeau has not had the year we wanted from him. Some of the other guys they have are not that good. Like, they're an interior pressure team. And then the back end, like, I think the secondary is still not in a good spot right now. They have a couple of nice players, but like as an overall operation, I still think they've got some holes. And I think that doesn't really let Martindale do a lot of the things that he was really known for with the Ravens, when like they had 2 dudes at corner and they were like, all right, we can just go press and we're gonna trust that we can scheme it up to get home. I just don't think they can do that at the level Wink wants to right now. So I think that's been a problem. Offensively, I think it's great that they went out and got Darren Waller, that they drafted a speedster in Jalen Hyatt, which I think is something they really needed. The problem is, like, that's such a different operation from what they were doing last year. Like, last year, it was all like, we're going to RPO, we're going to get under center, we're going to run 30 rollout flat routes to Daniel Bellinger, and we're going to run the piss out of the ball. Shifting completely to this offense where you're trying to use Darren Waller a lot more, who's really more of a receiver than a tight end, obviously. And then Jalen Hyatt, who, like, you really can't get under center and like use him as a blocker or anything. Like, he's like 175-pound speedster. Like, he's going down the field, and he did that against the Cardinals. Like, that's all he's got. So I just think, like, offensively, like, they have talent and they probably will figure it out, because I think Dable is a good coach, but like, it seems like it's going to take them a little bit to get going and really find what they want to do offensively, because it's a hell of a lot different than what they were trying to put together last year.
I feel like since I covered the Giants and Jets up here, I follow a lot of Giants fans on Twitter just to see what they were thinking while I was covering the team. right, check the pulse of the fan base. They like are already over Wink, and they were just kind of singing his praises last year. Look, with Wink, you live by the Wink, you die by the Wink. He's gonna be who he is no matter what. I remember last year when I was running this podcast, I had a conversation with Dominique Foxworth about Wink, and he's like, I wouldn't even, paraphrasing here, because I wouldn't really call what Wink does like a scheme. It's just a style of play. This is
it's like an idea.
It's going to be. It's an idea. 5-man, 6-man pressures every other play. That's the idea. And it looks great when you have some of the horses on the back end to keep it up. When you don't, you get cut up by Josh Dobbs. So yeah, look, I think, especially when you look at what the Cowboys did to the Jets again this week, there's probably a pretty clear delineation between where the real NFC contenders are and where the Giants are. And that sucks, especially after you lose Saquon Barkley in that game and they said he's going to be out for a few weeks with an ankle sprain. You kind of got to stay afloat. You get him back, and with how they look as a team on the total, who knows? Staying on the New York beats real quick. This was kind of funny from the past weekend. So you remember, obviously, last week, Monday Night Football, Aaron Rodgers goes down, Jets win. But the subplot of that game was Josh Allen was like totally cracked out. It's like he's playing all Madden for the first time after sitting on rookie for, however long. You can't just fling the ball 80 yards down the field in double coverage and expect, Stephon Diggs to aggressive catch it with Y or triangle and come down with it. You got to be actually precise with these throws. So after 3 picks last week, they play the Raiders on Sunday, and he got put on a leash. But for the betterment of the team, he went, 31-37, about 274 yards, 3 touchdowns. For majority of the game, he was at like 5 or 6 yards an attempt, but it was fine because they were moving the ball and things were moving in the right way. On the flip side, Zach Wilson, who struggled last week after filling in for Aaron Rodgers, was also kind of put on a leash this week, except in a comeback attempt, he started spamming interceptions and it died out pretty quickly. And I think we saw why the Jets went from like a nationally relevant team to a regionally relevant team in about 4 plays last Monday night. Derrik, your thoughts on Josh Allen and Zach Wilson and kind of what happened to them this past week?
I think it's funny just because they both got put on a leash, but what the leash was trying to do were two very different things. With Allen, it was like, hey, buddy, we know you have to carry this game. You're the second best quarterback in the league. You're a superstar. You've got all this. Let's take the easy ones a little bit. Let's take the checkdowns. Let's do some of the stuff that you were doing really early last year. Like when he looked like an MVP last season, it's because he was throwing quick game well. It's because he was playing on time. He was throwing checkdowns. He wasn't doing the stupid that he is typically prone to. And then in that week 1 game, he was like, all right, I'm going to let it all out. And they were like, all right, we need to rein you back in. We're still going to let you throw the ball 40 times. You're just going to throw a bunch of slants, hitches, check the ball down to James Cook a few times, throw a few screens, keep you in rhythm. They just wanted to make him be normal because he can be now. And they finally got that from him, and they scored like almost 40 points on, granted, not a very good Raiders defense, but 40 points in the NFL is 40 points. The Jets, on the other hand, they were like, we don't want Zach Wilson to play football. Like they for most of that game, if you're going to play against the Cowboys, who have a great defense, and their offense can score points, like the Cowboys offense was constantly getting to the red zone and they just faltered a little bit. Like they could have easily scored like 45 points in this game just by how they were marching down the field. You got to throw the ball, man. Like you have to be able to try to keep up with this team. And for most of this game, I mean, Zach Wilson had like 15 attempts. He had like 170 yards, and like half of it was on a Garrett Wilson catch and run where Malik Hooker just like completely brain farts over the middle of the field, taking his angle to tackle Wilson. They just did not want him to play football. And then they finally cut him loose when the game was like 20 points out of hand. But at that point, like, who is looking at Zach Wilson and being like, he's going to dig us out of a hole after we haven't trusted him the entire game? And so it was, they both got put on leashes. Very, very different from how it looks and what you get in the end.
Micah Parsons in that, the whole game, he was insane. But especially like towards the end when telling me I get to pin my ears back and run as hard as they can at Zach Wilson over Dwayne Brown, who's 38 years old.
On a guy who I know is going to hold the ball and run around because he thinks he's Josh Allen? Yeah, that sounds good to me.
It's crazy. Like, we've talked a lot about the Jets here at Yahoo over the past year, obviously, with the Aaron Rodgers trade and stuff, but I just can't believe that their plan for left tackle was just running it back with Dwayne Brown. And the idea that him missing most of training camp wouldn't be like a serious impediment on what they want to accomplish this year, I don't understand. I also don't understand their insistence on keeping Zach Wilson the starter. Like, you already took the L there. He's not good. So why are you just...
That can't last, man. It cannot last. The only thing I can think is, like, I think they went 5-4 last year with him as a starter, which at that pace might be a playoff team. But the thing is, like, why you didn't want to live that way. You spent your entire offseason to not live that way. There's no reason to not cut your losses again and just be like, all right, we're going to go get, I don't know, Jameis or Jacoby Brissett or whoever the hell else is out there. Like, if we got to go down to Carson Wentz, we got to go down to Carson Wentz. Like, it cannot be Zach Wilson at this point.
No,
they've already admitted that this is not the way to live as a football team.
But when they actually talk, they say, Zach,
he's the guy.
We're in. Yeah, because football is one of the weird things in life where you have to wait for the honesty, like the true honesty, because there's 2 times when teams will be honest to you: in free agency, in the draft, like the off-season area, and then on the actual games on Sundays. They'll tell you exactly how much they trust Zach Wilson when they start calling plays. And the answer was not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. So I don't know why you're going to go up here and tell me that Zach's the guy. He's going to be QB1 for the rest of the season. We're not bringing any real competition. The math's not mathing to me. Before we get into our ad break, sadly, last night, Nick Chubb suffered a horrific knee injury. One that honestly was similar to the one he had in college. It was the same knee. I remember exactly where I was for that injury because I'm, a big Georgia fan. I was at the bar with my buddy, and you just saw the way like his leg basically snapped. The first time, I was honestly stunned he played football again, and more so stunned that he seemed to get better every year after that injury, to the point where he was one of the most dominant players in football. Last night, same thing happens. You can argue whether the play hits dirty or not. I don't know. I don't really think Mika Fitzpatrick had that intention. I think the plays happen so fast in real time. You don't always realize like what's going on in terms of the damage that you can do to another human being. But anytime you're in a situation where that plant leg is stuck on the ground and it catches like a full speed body, that's going to be like a season ender every single time. So Nick Chubb, they confirmed pretty much immediately yesterday he was out after the game. Stefanski said he's out for the season. I'm not sure if we've got an official update on what that injury is, but it was pretty brutal. And it kind of pushes the scope of the Browns season into a different stratosphere where you're saying, hey, in a world where Nick Chubb gets hurt and we have a $230 million quarterback, I'm not saying that Nick Chubb isn't a great player. He is. I think he's like a Hall of Fame caliber running back just in terms of pure talent. But you would hope that you'd be able to survive that to a degree if you're paying your quarterback $230 million guaranteed, a fully guaranteed contract. But the Browns, they couldn't get it done last night. And it kind of makes you wonder, can Deshaun Watson carry an offense anymore?
I don't think so. So I wrote about this, and my take on the Chubb thing is like I know it's a passing league and like passing still matters, running backs are replaceable, yada, yada, yada. I think Nick Chubb is the only running back in the league where the entire offensive operation hinges on what he brings. Like because it's not just that he has the explosive plays that you get from a Derrick Henry or some of the other guys. Like he obviously has that explosive element you need for a top running back. It's the efficiency. There is nobody who keeps the offense on schedule the way that Nick Chubb does. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know like his rushing yards over expected is always insane. So it's not just that the scheme is good and that he has a good offensive line, and he does. It's that he just has this unbelievable vision, balance, explosion. The way just like how agile he is for a guy who's like 220, 230 pounds. He's such a rare runner that they built the entire Stefanski 4 years ago when he took the job, built the whole ship around Nick Chubb, and that's been the plan basically since he got there. General manager tried to throw a wrench in it by strapping him to this $230 million quarterback who we don't really know or think is any good anymore. But at the end of the day, the whole operation is based around what Nick Chubb does, because he keeps the offense on the six, or ahead of the six. And if you can keep the offense ahead of the six, it opens up the entire playbook. It makes things easier on everybody else, makes things easier on your quarterback, who, again, is not playing very well right now, even though you paid him a lot of money to play really well. So, like, my take on it was, I think if they're not going to get the consistent gains that they've gotten from Nick Chubb, where you know he's going to get you 5 yards and you're going to be in a good spot, when you're getting into more 2nd and 9s, which lead to a 3rd and 7 maybe, now the burden of the offense is on Deshaun Watson and 2 tackles who I don't think are great in pass protection right now. Like, DeJuan Jones looks nice for a 4th-round rookie, but I don't think he's a superstar yet. And then on the left side, Jedrick Wills, I think, is probably a below-average pass protector. So when you have that, and Deshaun Watson likes to hold the ball for as long as possible, you saw it last night. Like, he was trying to run around for his life, making plays, grabbing face masks as much as he could. Like, it just feels like the cornerstone of the offense has completely crumbled, and the rest of the house is coming down. That's what it feels like to me.
Hell yeah. The important part for Browns fans to just kind of sit with and grapple with, no one's coming to save you on this. There is no trade that you could make. There's nothing here except waiting to see if he's going to be good. Because honestly, I think if Watson had come out and said, I apologize for my actions, show some real contrition, then maybe you could salvage this in a way that kind of gets his public image to a point where you can pull off a trade if this keeps going in the same direction. But no, it's not happening. It's too much money for a guy who's been really, really bad. And look, this is the legacy for Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. Like, this is it for them. You traded 3 first-round picks, a fully guaranteed $230 million contract for a quarterback who might not be any good anymore. That's bad. That's really, really bad. But we'll get to some younger quarterbacks who actually have a promising future with their teams after a quick word from our sponsors. All right, we're back. First-year quarterbacks. Or first-year starting quarterbacks, I should say. There's been a handful this year, and I think that some guys have already had a big impact on their team's success in positive ways, negative ways, and a couple of these guys really look like promising starters for the coming futures. But let's start off with a couple guys who are not new to the NFL, but new to a starting role. Jordan Love with the Packers, Desmond Ridder with the Falcons, Sam Howell with the Washington Commanders. You know, as we know, Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell are in their 2nd years in the league. I think Jordan Love is in his 4th because he was drafted in 2020.
He was with Herbert and Tua and Jalen Hurts.
That's right, right, the 2020 draft. So yeah, Jordan Love was drafted in the 2020 draft, so now he's got his chance to start for the Packers. They are 1-1 after a loss to the Falcons. What's your thoughts on Jordan Love so far and what you've seen from him?
I think he looks nice. Like, honestly, like, you know, the whole deal with Green Bay moving on from Aaron Rodgers was LaFleur gets to run his offense now, and he's basically said as much. Like, after the Week 1 game, I know they asked him, you know, did Jordan Love change anything at the line? He was like, nope, we ran the offense. But I think that's good because, like, LaFleur is an amazing play caller, and I think they have the offensive line to get away with a lot. And I think Jordan Love has done a really good job of running the offense. Like, they're not really hand-holding him in terms of the concepts that they're running. Like, they're really asking him to throw over the middle of the lot, throw into a lot of tight windows, throw it down the field. Like, they're making him make big boy throws. And I think it's not all the way there yet in terms of the execution, but you can see the gears turning of Jordan Love being able to play on time, get to the right throws, and try to make them into tight windows and stuff. And I think you just hope that with a little bit more experience, not even just from him, but from all the young receivers, like we mentioned it at the top of the show, all those dudes are babies. Like all those pass catchers are very, very young. And so I think it's probably going to take a little bit of time for the execution to get there. But just from a process perspective, when you watch Jordan Love, I've been impressed. Like I don't know what the ceiling is yet, but he feels like a dude who is here to stay. And I think that's 2 games in. I feel like that's a pretty good spot for Packers fans.
Another one, like 3 straight quarterbacks. Come
I
on.
know, man. I know.
you got some teams that, and I agree with you because he looks good. Like he looks like he's kind of started to turn the corner. And I was not a fan of his coming out of Utah State. Obviously, the physical traits were there, but like so much just needs to be broken down, built up from scratch. And I guess that sitting for 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers, it certainly doesn't look to have hurt them. If you're starting from the standpoint of like we said, this is a young offense, especially at skill spots, but you're still producing. That's got to feel pretty good to a degree, even if they weren't able to pull out that game against Atlanta on Sunday. Jordan Love, I'm interested. I'm intrigued. Like if you can just get the consistency down, because he's got all the talent to make all the big time throws that you want, but like you said, there's still some times where either he just flat out misses a throw or there's miscommunication over the middle or something like that. They're just going to have to. And look, those are good problems to have at the early part of the season, right? Because you can practice on that. You can work on the timing. You can work on simply being in the right spot and knowing the right words to use to communicate with your teammates. The other stuff is kind of tough. So I think the Packers might have done it again, which is, it is what it is. That's what I'll say about that. The player that Jordan Love was playing against on Sunday, Desmond Ridder, the Atlanta Falcons, the 2-0 Dirty Birds, as many people are saying, in the toughest division in football with 3 2-0 teams, the NFC South. Many people are saying this. More and more people are saying this, in fact. Desmond Ridder has had an interesting season so far. Week 1 was like nothing almost. I mean, it was even hard to evaluate sometimes because he just did so little. But week 2, started to see some things. Derek, what you think?
I won't lie. Week 1, I hit the panic button a little bit because like he didn't really like do anything wrong. It just felt a little bit like the Zach Wilson thing that I mentioned against the Cowboys, where it was like, they just don't want you throwing the ball. That's not good. Like they were throwing a bunch of screens. I think he only had like 17 attempts or something like that. And I know their possessions and plays overall were limited, but it just didn't seem like they trusted him to do anything. So I was pretty scared that we were going to keep getting that. Nope, we come to week 2 and they're letting him play ball. Like they are really, I think they opened up the offense a lot. And really what impressed me the most was how he handled the red zone, which that's always kind of been the thing with Ridder, in the sense of like, he's really good on 3rd down, under pressure, got to have it situations. Like he's kind of inconsistent throughout certain portions of the game, but like when you got to have it, he has some degree of like, I don't know if you want to call it like savvy or just toughness, or he's just a leader, whatever BS you want to say. He shows up in those moments, and I think that's important. Like you saw it in the red zone, like whether it was he had one throw that was kind of like a slant to, I think maybe Michael Pruitt over the middle, where like he sees the safety's leverage, throws away from it, allows the receiver to protect the ball. Like that's the kind of throw in the red zone, like that kind of timing, that kind of placement. You love to see it. He had another one where he's rolling to his left and makes a throw on the run, which is impressive. He had the one to Mac Hollins that got called back, which is ridiculous. I thought that was a touchdown. But like it just seemed like when the field got condensed and they really needed to score points, he was really playing well. And I think for this Falcons offense specifically, that's important because I trust them to get to the red zone. Like, and they run the hell out of the ball. And I think even just some of the, dink and dunk plays you can get to, like Drake London, Kyle Pitts is obviously fantastic when they can get him chunk plays. They're going to get to the red zone. And if you have a guy who can look like that in the red zone, I'm not saying Desmond Ridder is going to be like a Pro Bowler or anything, but like that's enough of a formula to keep the little undefeated streak here going.
I think one of the things that really shined in that Packers game that kind of got undersold when people were like, well, why the hell would they, spend this year trying to figure it out? Dude, he's got some tools, man. Like,
his arm is better than people think it is.
I think it's good. Like,
yeah.
Straight up. And the biggest thing I worry about him physically is he's just a skinny guy. Straight up, there's just no denying it. I mean, he's got the height, he's got the arm, he's got the speed. I mean, he's a low 4.5 guy. So, on some days he's hitting that 4.4, but the weight is where I get a little concerned. Like, I don't know if you saw this play, but they tried to do like the Eagles tush push QB sneak and didn't get it.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about the tush push is just people all last year were like, why doesn't everyone do this? It's like, well, everyone's quarterback doesn't squat 600 pounds.
No. Yeah, do you know how strong
it doesn't work that way?
The Jalen Hurts could like physically play running back. I'm not saying he is a running back, but physically he could play the position. So, like the tush push, it's not for every team. It's not for Desmond Ridder. It's not for the Falcons, but that's okay because I think even when you see the touchdown he scored on the zone read late in the fourth quarter, like he's got that burst to get to the edge, and I think even with like the Drake London touchdown, he's got that arm to just kind of fit it in there in a close quarter against one of the better cornerbacks in the league, in Jair Alexander. So, look, that game got us moving back in the right spot. The 2 drop picks were woof.
They were bad. I think
bad.
They were a different kind of bad too, because the one to Jair Alexander where it's either like 3rd or 4th and 3 or whatever. Drake London's over to the left side by himself. He's running a hitch route. The thing is, like, Jair Alexander is playing inside leverage back to the field. He's waiting for this route the whole way, man. Like, he knows this is coming. Ridder has to know better than that to force that ball in. I thought the second one to Quay Walker was kind of funnier and it better characterized who Desmond Ridder is as a prospect, where he has what is like Peyton Manning disease, and Dak Prescott is afflicted with this, where he's just like, I'm going to make the perfect throw in the perfect window on perfect timing every time. And it's like, buddy, sometimes it's not there and you don't need to do that, because he's trying to progress all the way to the back of the field and throw the backside dig on like 3rd and 15. And it's like, okay, I know you did this earlier in the game when it was open. It's not open this time. So let's not throw it. But he tried to force it anyway and probably should have got picked off for it. I love the aggression, but, let's chill out a little bit.
Look, yeah, I appreciate the aggression. And I appreciate that game because this year for the Falcons, it needs to be about finding out what Ridder is. Like, having a game like you did week 1, it serves no one. I know you got the win, but you can't get to this season and feel like, well, what's Ridder all about? No. You got to figure this out because, look, you're going to be in a spot where the Bears own your division rival's first-round pick. That means that's a pick you can go get if you need to go get Caleb Williams or Drake May or Shedeur Sanders.
We doing that already, huh?
If we're going to indulge the masses. So, yeah, Ridder, good first step, I think, with that game on Sunday against the Packers. Sam Howell, to close off like our young veteran quarterbacks before we get to the rookies. He had a nice little game on Sunday. He's got some talent, man. I thought that they should have started Brissett over them this year, but I think with what he did on Sunday, there's like a little survivor's bias with some throws that he's making, but still, I think you're off to a good start with the Sam Howell stuff.
He's a highlight package quarterback right now. Because like the arm talent is pretty good. Like when he was at UNC, they threw the ball down the field a lot, and a lot of his best throws were like throwing go balls, throwing posts, like even into like pretty tight coverage. Like dude can spin it a little bit, and he's a really good runner. Like at UNC, they used him like almost like Dak at Mississippi State, where they were like, all right, buddy, short yardage or we got to have it. You're running all the time, and we're going to let you scramble whenever you want. And so like he's got the tools. It's just a matter of like, one, he's coming from a UNC system that was not. It was Phil Longo's, who is now at Wisconsin. It's a very like spread BS. This is not NFL football kind of system. So I think it's probably going to take a little bit of time for Howell to get there as a processor, but you can see it a little bit. I think the other thing with him too is like he's just got to get rid of the ball, and that comes with the processing thing. Where like his biggest issue is like he can make some cool throws down the field, he can run, he's going to take probably like top 5 most sacks in the NFL by the end of the season when we get there. And that's not even really an indictment on Washington's line. Like their line is okay. He just loves
It's
holding the
okay.
ball. And it's a double-edged sword. It comes with some cool plays, but again, you're going to have these games. I mean, I think in week 1 he got sacked like 6 times, which is like you can't have that happening against the Cardinals, bro. It just that cannot happen. So he's got to clean some of that stuff up, but he's talented enough to where I'm interested.
Yeah, and I thought that Bieniemy had a nice little bounce back game from the previous week against the Cardinals. I think it seems like they're kind of starting to figure some stuff out between the two of them, Howell and Bieniemy, and with the receiver core, kind of interested to see what happens the rest of the way. They got some playmakers they can get the ball to at least. Let's flip it to the rookie quarterbacks. Got Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud, who have started so far this year. Let's get it out of the way. Bryce Young. Man, look, it's never a good feeling when football looks really, really hard to someone, especially your first round pick. And the way that the game has changed physically for Bryce Young from what he was doing last year to now, at times, honestly, he just looks a little bit overwhelmed. He's done some nice things, and I say this as someone who really liked watching him play and thought he was a good quarterback prospect. The size, it's not just the size. It's like, if you're going to be that small, you kind of got to be like a Kyler Murray level athlete, and he's just not quite there. So yeah, that was a bit of a rough go for him last night against the Saints.
The Kyler thing was like my whole argument with him as a prospect. That it was like there's these other guys that have been short. I mean, Russell Wilson obviously was only 5'10", but it's like Russell Wilson was like 215, 220 pounds and had a rocket launcher for an arm. And he was a better runner than Bryce Young was. And then you obviously take that to the next level with Kyler Murray, where Kyler Murray also has a rocket and runs like a 4.4. That's a different level of tools than a guy where with Bryce Young, it feels like, again, this is only 2 games and maybe things are going to change, but it feels like Bryce Young has a little bit run into the Baker Mayfield thing where it's like you ran around a lot in college and it worked and that's cool. These NFL cats, they're faster. They're bigger, they're faster, they're meaner. And it looks like he is not quite over the bar that he thought he was going to be athletically to make some of his willy-nilly scrambling around type stuff work. And the thing is, like, that's central to his game. It's like Russell Wilson, where it's like, is he all that consistent as a passer in the pocket? Not really. But when he was at his best, he did so many magical things outside the pocket that it didn't matter. And that was kind of part of the formula with Bryce Young. If that is already kind of in jeopardy because he's just not the athlete that maybe he thought he was, or the Panthers were hoping he was, that's where I think this starts to get tricky, because inside the pocket and like as a down-to-down passer, I think he's just always going to have some issues because of the way that, he's a shorter guy, so it's just harder for him to see stuff. You can see the way that he throws, like, it's just harder for him to throw over linemen. He'll have to adjust in the pocket with these little movements because he has to find windows that, if you're 6'3", the window's there because you're 6'3". Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to move around defenders, whereas I think Bryce Young kind of has to do that sometimes. So, again, it's only 2 games, but I'm mildly worried.
Yeah, there's 2 situations to me that really get me worried about Bryce, like just watching him through the first 2 weeks and some of preseason too. One, dude, when the pocket starts collapsing in front of him, he just gets swallowed up by all of the mass around him. And I think, I think the strip sack that got called back for a penalty was one of those situations where, the center and the guards that kind of get walked back into his lap. And now the problem for him is I can't see what's going down the field anymore. So for him, he's going to have to bail. And that's where he can get himself into situations where, a strip sack is more possible when you're scrambling back out the back of like a crushed pocket already, and you already have these guys smelling blood and chasing you. That's a tough situation. And then 2, like when he's trying to scramble, he likes to try to get to the sideline and run up that way. Those windows close so fast on him when he's trying to get out there. There was one play last night that was reminiscent of another play that he had in the Panthers-Giants preseason game where, nothing's open, it's downfield. Like, okay, cool. I'll turn myself into a runner. and someone has closed in on him before he even gets back to the line of scrimmage when he's starting, 6-7 yards deep from behind the line of scrimmage. It's a different speed. There's still some nice throws that he made, but overall, I think the physical skill set or the lack thereof it is really, ooh, it's hard not to see when you start watching him play. So, Bryce, I do think things are going to get better for him just as he gets more reps, but and there was some nice moments in the fourth quarter for him, but it just looks so difficult for him right now in a way that it wasn't in college. But the other two guys, CJ Stroud for the Texans, Anthony Richardson, they look good. And especially, I know Richardson got hurt on Sunday with a concussion. We'll see what happens with him throughout the rest of the week. He's gotten off to a great start. And CJ Stroud, man, I think going back to the Justin Fields situation, there was like a little bit of doubt for me. They're just coming into the offseason like, okay, is this an Ohio State thing, like where it's taking him forever to rip the ball? Because we'll figure it out with CJ Stroud real quick, right? But I think when you see what's going on with CJ Stroud and his stuff in Houston, he's really ripping that thing and getting it moving down the field. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens with CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. And I think that they've gotten off to start to justify them being picked where they were.
I'm already all the way there with CJ Stroud. Like he just, you kind of mentioned it, but the thing that shocked me, not from the sense of like I thought CJ Stroud was going to be a bad or slow processor, but kind of from the Ohio State guys typically have been a little bit slow on the draw coming into the NFL, and like we've seen that with Justin Fields, it hasn't been fixed in 3 years. CJ Stroud came out immediately in week 1, and he was just everything's on time, whether it's third down, first down, no matter the concept. Like they were like the next level to that question was like, okay, we've seen him operate from like gun in drop back concepts, and like he really loves that like 10-yard out that Ohio State ran all the time. Like he's really good at throwing that on time and stuff. We know he can do that. How's he going to look in the Shanahan stuff where it's like you got to be under center, the dropbacks are different, the windows look different? How's that going to work? Every time they get to it, it is out as soon as it can be out. Ball's right where it needs to be, perfect placement, hits him in stride. That's, I think, what really has impressed me most. It's that he's playing with really good timing, which I think is impressive, but they've kind of been able to run every like mode and style of the offense, whether it's like the 1st and 10 Shanahan stuff, that's play action, whether it's like standard quick game, whether it's like 3rd and 9 and we got to throw it the sticks, like every kind of offense that they've need to run, they've been able to run through Stroud. And I think he's just been awesome. And he's been pretty good outside the pocket. Like I know that was a big question with him for most of his time at Ohio State. And then he kind of answered that a little bit with the Georgia game at the end. It seems like the Georgia game was more of like what he's capable of, because it seemed like both in the Ravens game and in this game, when he's forced outside the pocket, he's a really good athlete, and he's not going to do the Josh Allen throw 50 yards down the field and do something insane off of his back foot. But like for a guy who can get outside the pocket and just find the right plays, I think he's got that. So I'm very in on CJ Stroud already.
Yeah. And I think it kind of changes what you, or at least for me, a little bit, what to think about guys who play on these loaded offenses in college. Because, the CJ Stroud stuff, I think it's turned out to be, well, he's playing with Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave, yep. Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, already very strong receivers in the NFL, and Marvin Harrison Jr. will probably be, a top 3 to 5 pick at worst in next year's draft. So I'm excited for all of them. I want to see Bryce get back on track just because it's fun when the NFL has good quarterbacks. And I think the idea of him just being like his dimensions working out in the league would be funny, but it's it just looks very difficult for him right now. All right, we're almost done here. Last thing before I get you out here, just the last funny thing from the weekend. Did you see how many yards Josh Jacobs rushed for this weekend?
Oh, I know it was something like a -2 or something along. Was that correct? I know it's like something right in that wheelhouse.
9 carries for -2 yards. Look, anytime you can.
Bill's run defense is not even that good.
It's not. It's not. Yeah, it's not. The Raiders, they had 55 rushing yards on 15 carries, and one of those carries was a 34-yard run. Yeah, rough
That's
time to
not
be
a
a
way to
Raiders fan.
run efficient offense, in my
Rough,
opinion.
rough time to be a Raiders fan. But, that's just a shot across the bow at our friend Jason Fitz, who hosts a lot of good podcasts here for Yahoo. So with that, Derrik, anything you want to plug before you get out of here?
No, I mean, Bleacher Report. I'm also writing for some NFL stuff over at 33rd Team. I mentioned it, but if you would like to read a bigger take on what I wrote about the Nick Chubb and the Browns and how I think they're completely doomed, you can go do that. Other than that, yeah.
We'll be back with another episode of the Exempt List next Tuesday and every Tuesday. Tune in tomorrow for an episode of Inside Coverage with Jason Fitz, the Raiders fan, Charles Robinson, and Jory Epstein. You can find me on Twitter at 4verts. My friend Derrik is on Twitter at QB Class. That's QB Class with a K. And our friend and producer Stone Rochelle is behind the glass at SJ Rochelle. Please leave a 5-star review. Tell a friend to subscribe to the Zero Blitz podcast feed, and we will see you next week.